Welcome to the sixth episode of Health Huddle, where we discuss interesting topics about healthcare, wellness, and genetics every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So, today's discussion, as you would already know, is about DNA in movies. Okay. So
Yeah.
DNA in movies is basically a series that we're doing, where we want to talk about how genetics are portrayed in films and TV shows, and also to debunk the science behind how they actually work, or if they're actually exaggerated. So we wanna tell you guys the truth behind the science of all these movie DNA portrayal. Okay, and today's main topic that we are going to talk about is DNA sampling methods that are shown in movies and TV shows. So, welcome everyone, and thanks for tuning in. And I am Jane from Advanx Health, and this is Lynette, also from Advanx Health.
Hi, I'm Lynette from Advanx.
Yeah. So, we'll be your host for today, and if you have any questions about DNA or DNA sampling, feel free to leave your comments below and join us in this discussion. Okay, so before we begin, maybe we can tell them a little bit about what is DNA sampling.
Yeah, sure. So, actually, the DNA sampling is the way that how we collect the DNA from a certain DNA samples that we can collect from by swabbing from our cheeks or from saliva, blood, hair, nails, bones, semen, urine, feces, tissue cells to determine the DNA profile of a person, of an individual.
So
Yeah.
sampling is
So this is DNA
basically
sampling.
the method you use to get somebody's DNA lah.
Yep.
Okay, so I think in movies there's a lot of DNA sampling methods that we commonly see. And the main purpose they use DNA sampling for is either one for paternity testing, like when they want to find out if this guy is the baby's father, stuff like that.
Yeah. The drama,
Yeah,
right?
all the Hokkien drama, they like to do all this. A second one would be to do forensic testing when they want to identify a victim or criminal with like skin tissue or like with hair, with blood. So these are the two
Yeah.
common DNA sampling reasons in all these movies. So let's talk about the methods in specific. So like I mentioned, one of it just now was hair. So we know that
Yes.
DNA sampling is one of the DNA sampling methods is to use your hair. But how do you actually get DNA from your hair?
Okay, so actually it's quite common when we watch movie or drama, they always like pluck someone's hair and then they say, "Oh, I want to go and test." Yeah,
Yeah, like they just take,
it's
they
very
just take
common.
one.
Uh, yeah, it's very common when you can see in drama and movies. But actually, um, for hair, we can divide it into two parts lah. We have shaft and also roots. So actually, from both also we can get the DNA, but with different technique.
Mm,
And for your hair, but for your hair DNA testing to be very successful, we must have the follicles uh to attach lah at your hair. Means you must have the root also.
ah,
And then yes, and then for the shaft, like your hair when you cut it, it's not entirely useless, but they are fine for every specific type of the test. There's a specific test for the cut hair or the shaft. It's known as mtDNA test, which is mitochondrial DNA.
mhm.
So this technique actually is used to determine whether the two persons share the same maternal line or not.
Mm,
So this is the difference lah. But actually, if you really want to get a very very successful DNA test, it's better to have the roots with
mm,
yeah, the roots, the whole roots and the shaft, the whole thing lah. And then we actually, if one only is not possible to get accurate,
Oh, so
the
means
accurate
you cannot just take like pluck one
one.
strand like that. Cannot lah. How much hair do you use?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, we need at least 6 to 10 strands
6
to
to 10.
get the very, very successful DNA test. Yeah,
Okay lah. A bit hard, right?
one is not enough.
To get 10 strand from somebody discreetly, you need to pluck their hair 10 strands.
Yeah, but you pluck until the third one, I think the person already noticed, like, hey, why you plucking my hair?
But okay, I think a lot of people kind of know that, some of this may be exaggerated, but a lot of us think that, you can only use the root with the follicles. We thought that the bottom one, oh, you cannot use. But so you
Yeah,
actually can use one lah.
we can use it, but only for specific technique.
So
Specific test.
is hair sampling actually commonly used?
It's not commonly used because we cannot make sure that every hair strands we have the follicles with it, and also for the freshly plucked hairs, maybe we can get a better result lah. But if for the old one, we
Or
need
like fall off already one? Okay.
yeah, the old one we need to opt to use a more advanced testing method, but it will cost more, means higher cost for that.
So,
Yeah,
so
so it's not very common lah.
So if let's say like their hair is like damaged or like they dye it already or something, then would it affect the DNA test also?
If for the damaged one, it possibly will affect the result. Yeah, because as we mentioned, if the older hair, we might need a very, very advanced testing method lah for that. So how is the accuracy? I'm not sure, but it's definitely will affect the result lah.
I see. Okay, so now we know hair sampling is possible, but it's
Yes,
definitely not as easy as those Hokkien drama where they just go and pluck one strand of hair,
one hair.
then it's enough. You need 6 to 10 strands. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's not a very efficient way to do sampling lah, since it's a bit hard
Right.
and very painful to
Yeah.
get hair sample. Okay, so let's talk about the next sampling method. Used cups or used tissue paper. So the scenario is also I think some Hokkien drama or all these dramas where they will just go to the rubbish bin and pick up a paper cup that the girl used before, then they go and send it to the lab, then they can get the DNA result. So
Yeah.
how do you actually get DNA from saliva, for example?
Okay, for if for this scenario, the cup and tissue paper, all that, actually before we talk about saliva, there is another thing that that we call it as touch DNA. Means that when you just hold a cup or you just use a tissue, anything, touch or when you touch something, there's definitely some small amount of DNA is attached to it, because your hand probably will sweat, or maybe you will have some skins, the what we call it, the dried skin, or the flakes of the skin tissue over there. So there's a small amount of DNA on it lah. So actually for that, it's already enough to get a DNA profile already of a person. Yeah. So for even for the cups, some girls, they are using the lipsticks, and then when they drink, there's a mark over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, that also we also can get the DNA from that.
Oh, okay. So how do you actually get DNA from saliva? Because in those scenario, for example, that they show in movies, it's like just very little bit. So is it enough, or in reality do you actually need more volume?
It actually depends on what test you are taking. But if we talk about crime scene, means that if for crime scene there's a lot of possibility. We cannot expect that we can get a really good amount of the saliva or the other
Samples
other
lah.
samples.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we cannot predict, we cannot expect we can get a big amount because whatever left you left. So for that also we actually can get the DNA profile, but we need more evidence to show to support the data that we get.
Mm-hmm.
But if you aside from the crime scene, if you are doing some kind of DNA test like paternity test or some health screening test, something like that, then probably we need a more amount of the more big volume of the saliva so that we can get more DNA in it.
So,
Because
unless it's
yeah,
for forensic,
yes,
usually you will need more lah than just one tissue paper.
yeah, because if you are just only doing a test, means the person only will receive one of your sample, only saliva sample. So whatever they will get just only from the saliva sample. But if crime scene, there's a lot of possibility. So definitely they will get many different samples. Maybe it's from you or other person. But if we are only doing certain types of tests, then probably we need more amount so that we can get more DNA extracted, and then we can get a more accurate result for that.
So if let's say for like wellness testing or like paternity testing, and I just bring you one tissue paper like that, with the DNA, it's usually not enough.
It's not enough for that.
So is this of course, I think normal people, unless you're very desperate, you won't go and sample using tissue paper or cups lah. But if, for example, in the case of saliva sampling, is this a very common kind of practice in general labs for DNA tests?
Yeah, it's a quite a common technique, common sampling method for the normal DNA test. That yeah, because we can get a lot of DNA from our saliva and also our cheeks. Mostly the buccal swab means the cheek swab, and also saliva. These two types method is the most common one.
Okay. Okay. So we've gone through two sampling methods so far. One is hair, and now for use cups or tissue paper. Also we're talking about saliva sampling. So from now we know that small volume is possible, but usually only for labs with the technology to be able to process that for forensic purposes. But for general labs,
Yeah.
it's generally not enough, and you definitely need higher volume of sample for those. So let's move on to the next sampling method. So okay, another scenario. I think this one also sometimes we see like in some shows or some movies where they just take one drop of blood. Like maybe this person accidentally had a paper cut. Then they go and take the blood drop on the paper. Then they go and do the test. So is this possible?
Okay, so for this scenario, actually blood there is two types of the sampling method. One is in liquid form when the blood is in pools, and another one is probably the dry blood stain. So for the liquid one, there's two ways for the liquid one. Usually they will pick on through the gauze pad or the clean sterile cotton cloth, and then it should be dry thoroughly, and then in refrigerator and also frozen it. Then only we'll send it to the laboratory. But we have to send it as soon as possible. It's better not to delay 48 hours, because probably if there's any delay or from 48 hours, then result might not very accurate already, or maybe the blood is we cannot use that samples already. Yeah, so this is the liquid. And for the dried stain, usually it will drop on the cloth or maybe on some solid object. Then for the if the blood is dropped on the cloth, so we have to wrap it in a clean paper, and then we'll place it in the brown paper bag or a box. Then we have to seal it and label it. But do not remove the stain from the cloth. You have just, what you need to do is just cut off the cloth and then just send the whole piece to the lab, but don't remove the stain from there, because the lab, they have a certain process. They'll use some chemicals to remove the stain from the cloth. And if for the solid object, if the small one also same, you have to cover it with the paper bag or something and then send it to the lab. But for the big object, some object is not possible to like send the whole thing to the lab, right? So you can use a clean knife, there's already washed properly, and then we can scrape it off, scrape the stain, and then scrape it onto a paper, and then but the paper must have to I mean, the paper, we can fold it up, the paper that we can fold it, and also we can place it in the envelope. So the main point is we have to use the freshly washed and also dried knife lah. Yeah, but do not mix the dried stain together lah. I mean, you have to make it separately because you're not sure, right, whether is it someone's blood, something like that. Yeah.
So does that mean that, if you use this kind of method, like, you scrape it off, for example, like the wall, or
Yeah.
you take from a dried gauze or something, does that mean you don't actually need a lot of blood for it?
Yeah, because for, as I mentioned just now, from the crime scene, there's a lot of possibilities. So sometimes we are not able to get a lot of amount of blood. So whatever left you left, so we only can get whatever is left over there, and then but then we are still able to get the DNA profile, because in the forensic lab is actually a they have very high tech and also advanced technique, and also what we call it, equipments to the high sensitivity technology to get the DNA profile from the small amount of the samples. But then we still need a lot of evidence to prove that this blood belongs to this person. Yeah, so there's a lot of possibilities from the crime scene. So even if small amount, we can get DNA profile from there, but we need more evidence and also more investigation to make sure that the result that we get is accurate one. It belongs to this person or do not belong to this person. Yeah.
So if, for example, let's say there's this blood DNA there's this blood sample, okay, but then let's say the blood is mixed, it's not just one person's blood. So when you run the test in the lab, would the lab be able to know that it actually belongs to how many people?
Actually, for last time, the very old time, maybe we only can know that this blood belongs to someone. But then for now, the technology is more and more advanced. We can know that the DNA mixture is from certain person, but then there's three main factors that we have to determine the complexity of the DNA mixture lah. Because actually, if the DNA is mixed together, then we need some time, and we need a lot of time to determine this DNA is belong to which persons. So there's three main factors that we have to aware of. One is how many people contribute to the DNA to the mixture. So if there is more contribution, so means that there is more complexity. So it's more difficult for us to determine who belongs, the DNA belongs to which individual. Okay. So the second one is how much of DNA did each person contribute. Means that the DNA we might have a lot of DNA samples over there, but one or several people, they might have contributed a little bit DNA only. So if there's a lower amount, there's more complexity to get the non-complexity, and then it's more difficult to get the result that we want. And then for the third one is how degraded is the DNA. Means that because DNA will degrade over time, and also when it exposed exposed to a certain element, it might have a contamination or degrade. So it also increased the complexity for us to determine the DNA belongs to which person.
So if since you said DNA degrades over time, and it might get contaminated, all that, does it mean that if let's say the sample actually degraded a lot, and it's also contaminated with other substances, for normal labs that doesn't have such high technology, they would not be able to identify or be able to run the test or to identify the DNA profile?
Yes, if for degraded DNA or the contaminated DNA, probably I think most of the lab are not able to get the accurate result from there, because if your DNA is already degraded, the machine they can't detect your DNA, so your result might be false. Yeah.
So unless it's like your country's most high tech lab for forensic, then you won't be able to use that sample anymore lah.
Yeah, because the DNA is already degraded, we can't get anything from there.
Okay. So I guess, since most of the time when we see all these sampling methods, it's usually for forensics. Let's just assume that, in CSI, they actually get to send it to the most high-tech lab in the US. So that's how it works. But yeah, so I guess if any of us ever want to do a paternity test discreetly, we need to remember that blood sample need to be processed really soon lah, and that there's chance that it will degrade also.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's three sampling methods that we've covered so far. And I think now the last sampling method that we're gonna talk about today, which I think is only used in TV shows for crime scenes, is skin tissue. So the
Yeah.
scenario is usually sometimes they will find like from the victim's fingernail, that there are some skin flakes stuck inside or something. Then they will go and do the test, and then they'll find out, oh, this is the murderer, she scratched this person when he was killing her, stuff like that. So um how do you actually get DNA from skin tissue, and is it accurate?
Okay, so for the flakes of skin and also the for skin tissue, everything, actually as what I mentioned before, it also depends on the crime scene, how much of the volume left there. Even a little volume also we can get a DNA profile from there. So it is possible to get the DNA from there, and there's certain they of course they need to undergo a certain process like after the sample have been sent to the lab, they have to go through DNA screening, and then they have to purify the DNA, and then they will have to do validation, everything, go through a series of process. Then only we will get a really good result for that, good DNA test result for that. Yeah,
So it is
so
possible lah.
it's possible.
Okay. But then when you talk about skin tissue, because nowadays there's a lot of different skincare product or like cosmetic product. So if let's say for example, if the owner of the skin tissue had cosmetic products on at that time, so that means the skin flakes also has some component of the cosmetic product mixed with it. So would it actually affect the DNA result?
Okay, so for this part, actually it depends on the technique, because as I mentioned, when we have already collected the sample, we send it to the lab. We have to go through DNA extraction, and then we have a DNA purification steps in it, in the process. So after we have extracted the DNA, and then we have purified it, so it will be a very good we'll get a very good quality of DNA if the technique is correct, is right. So we'll have to do the validation test as well to know that whether this DNA is it pure or is it a very good quality DNA? So actually the cosmetic everything does not affect the DNA purity unless when in between the process there is something wrong, then probably it will affect the result lah. But if the technique is correct, the technician is they did everything correctly, they follow the protocol, everything, and the purification step is very, if the purification steps is right, so the cosmetic or anything, it won't really affect the DNA result.
Okay. So at least it's assuring to know that you won't really identify the wrong criminal, for example, in the case of the crime scene where they discover skin flakes. So okay, so
Yeah.
I guess in general, all these movies actually do portray the sampling methods somewhat quite accurately, like especially for like those crime scene movies, right?
Yeah, actually what the movies or drama they portray actually is quite true. It's just that maybe it's not as easy as what you see through the television. Because the way they show, because they cannot show very detailed, they only can show like, oh, I just going through this step, but it's not in detail. So it's quite accurate, but there is more details inside that, more process and also details that we need to really handle when we collect the samples and also process the sample. So actually, what we show in the drama and movie is quite accurate. I would say that, yeah.
Okay.
It's just that the process behind it maybe it's not that easy as what we show in.
Like they skip too much detail in between lah.
Yeah, they just skip the details because if you really want to show details, it's quite long already. I think can take it out for 1 or 2 episodes.
Oh yeah, makes sense.
And then people will get bored for that.
Okay. So I guess that would be all for our discussion for today. So if any of you who are watching, if you have any questions about DNA sampling or and just anything about DNA in general, do leave your questions in the comments below. Yeah, thanks Lynette for sharing your knowledge. I guess a lot of us has always have the idea that all these movies sure fake one lah, they just use the concept, but it's actually not possible to do like this. But I guess from today's discussion, we know that it's actually possible, but you will need high technology, skilled technicians, and also probably a lot more time lah. As
and
compared
more
to what
evidence. More evidence and more investigation to make sure that the result is accurate.
I guess if anyone ever want to find out if you are your mother's daughter, just go and do the test with your mother instead of plucking her hair. Yeah, you need to pluck 10 strands. It's too difficult for her to not catch you. So yeah, movie sampling methods is for special case only lah. So yeah, we'll just go for the easier, more efficient methods at the labs. Alright, so there are no other questions, then we officially wrap up today's episode. So thank you once again for joining us on the 6th episode of Health Huddle. Do share today's episode with your friends and family, and stay tuned to our upcoming episode. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And yeah, thanks for joining us and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jane. Bye.
Thanks, Lynette. Bye.
So if you're telling me that the COVID vaccine is not safe, I think better don't eat anything.
All
no
right,
peanut, no seed.